See a lot of people. Bye, Todd.
I'm going to call this meeting to order for the Legal and Finance Committee for the City of Rapid City on May 11th, 2022 at 12:30 p.m. First up is roll call and determination of a quorum. Robin?
Drew?
Here.
Lehman? Here. Nordstrom? Here. Weifenbach?
Here.
Solomon?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Solomon, second by Lehman. All in favor?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
we were going to postpone an item before you adopted the agenda.
Oh, before? Oh, okay. Well, usually we just do it as part of the
okay, that's
meeting.
fine.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. Sit down. Okay. General public comment, a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken on at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. We have no general public comment, so general public comment is now closed. We'll go on to presentations. First up, we have the airport presentation. Key future airport infrastructure needs. Presenters Tom Schauer, Mead and Hunt, Senior Aviation Advisor, and Patrick Dame, Airport Executive Director.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk. I'm Patrick Dame, I'm the Executive Director of the Rapid City Regional Airport. I also have with me Tom Schauer, Senior Planner at Mead and Hunt. We wanted to come in, and the airport board has been working through doing quite a bit of work on the terminal and looking at options of the terminal and working towards moving forward towards a final solution. With that, we have Tom here, and we wanted to just go over kind of where we've been and ensure that the council is fully informed of where we've been and where we're going into the future with this project. With that, I'll bring Tom up to the podium.
Thanks, Patrick. What we'd like to do is go over today just really quickly a little bit of what's going on in the terminal project that we're planning, go over some of the challenges we're seeing, open it up for questions. Our role today is just more informational. There's nothing really we're looking for from you guys, but just to give you a little overview of where the airport's headed and looking at from a planning and development process directly related to the airport terminal. Right now, the airport has embarked on a planning exercise over the last several years and came up with an airport plan for developing and expanding the airport terminal. That plan is divided up into 4 sections. Roughly, it's the ticketing and baggage makeup area, the passenger concourse, the security checkpoint, and the rental car and baggage return, and I'll go over these in more details as we go through. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. What you see before you on the left side is the existing airport concourse where the passengers would come in. They'd have the ticketing counters, and in turn, you'll see the black lines are the baggage conveyor belts that take the baggage to the backside of the terminal. One of the things that if you go to most terminals, I realize most people don't see the backside of an airport terminal. Generally what happens in every airport that I can tell you that I've worked at in the last 15, 20 years, those baggage carousels that go in the back, take the luggage to the back, they go onto a carousel that make it easy for the air carriers to slide the luggage off into the back of a tug. That tug takes it out to the aircraft. Rapid City Regional does not have that. Their baggage system is very, very antiquated. If you go and out there right now, you'll see the security devices are right behind two of the air carrier counters, where the air carriers will move into that, they'll slide them in, and they'll go through, in public view, go through the security devices into the back where they're tugged, are loaded onto a tug that are hand pushed out of the building and hooked onto tugs. On the right side, you're going to see something that, this is actually on the right side is what TSA recommends. That's quite an extreme development and quite costly. In part of this process, we'll be working with the TSA to come up with a hybrid version that fully meets all the requirements of security, as well as is fully functional and handles not only today's capacity needs, but also expanded capacity needs, but doesn't provide the Cadillac version. But you can see there's notable expansion in the back side of the building. Other things I want to point out is on the right side, you'll notice the ticket counters are right underneath, right above the number 7 is straight lined, as opposed to the sawtooth on the left side. Why that's important as we're pushing the counters back to give a little more space for queuing. In addition to that, one of the things when you're done, if you're unfamiliar with the airport, you get done meeting at the air carrier, you turn, you can see a straight line view of the whole concourse, so it's easier to do wayfinding to the development that's recently been completed where you have the new escalators, staircase, easy to find your way through there. In addition, what it allows you to do with the straight line is for air carriers to share or shift and expand their spaces as they need throughout the day. So it allows you to flex and have a better utilization of the ticketing counters in and of themselves. That way you can accommodate more air carrier operations, more air carriers in the terminal as well by allowing that flexibility to slide up and down the counters as needed. On the left here, I just grabbed a couple of photos just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. When you look in the back of the terminal, you see people that have loaded the tugs actually up, manually pulling them out where they'll hook them onto carts or tug carts to take them out to the air carriers. No other airports this size are doing this kind of work, haven't for many, many years. Usually those carts are pulled up to a baggage carousel. As you look on the right side, you'll see kind of that schematic. Number 4 are these carousels. Typically the carts would pull up to those, the baggage would be going on there, the laborers would slide those right on and make it much easier, especially in today's world right now where you're looking at people that, you know, it's hard to get great employees, things like that. If we make their jobs harder, it makes it even harder to get those employees. So that's one of the things this resolves. In addition, you'll see on the bottom left, the photo there is just a queuing of one of the big flights coming in and out from an Allegiant flight. You can see how that space can get quite congested. We're not trying to overbuild the area, but we do want to expand it and allow it to have a little better utilization. Estimated cost for that build right now for that portion alone is roughly $25 to $35 million. The reason you look at some of the big gaps, some of that with the pricing in today's supply chain issues is quite variable. We also have the variation of trying to streamline this process and get rid of some of the conveyor systems that are shown on the screen as it exists today. Other phase of the project was the rental car area and baggage return, which is on the other side of the main terminal. Realistically, there on the photo, you'll see the ticketing queuing for rental cars is quite constrained. So when you have flights where you have 100 and some people coming in and out, that area gets quite congested. Also, one of the things would be to expand another baggage carousel for the flights coming in and out to help streamline the process of getting bags in and out of the building, as well as handling and processing the rental car areas. Estimated cost, not a lot of a big project, but $9 to $13 million. One of the things we were looking at doing is the security checkpoint. For those of you who fly out of Rapid City, you'll realize the checkpoint right now is on the sloped area between kind of the main terminal and the concourse. TSA, we were going to expand that area and utilize that to expand the TSA checkpoints. TSA's new equipment that they use cannot be installed on a sloped environment such as at the Rapid City area right now. So initial planning phases done by a Alliance of Architects had put it there. We're revisiting that and looking at another location and trying to figure that out. So that will have a major change in that development. Right now, the Rapid City Regional Airport has 2 checkpoint lanes. Because of peak hours, and I'll highlight some of the peak hours in just a little bit, realistically, at a minimum, you should be at 3 checkpoint lanes. TSA is trying to get there. Ultimate build that we see as a planning level, as TSA also agrees with this, is ultimately you should have 5 to handle the next growth in the next 5 years. So a notable change in those areas as well. When the planning study was done a few years ago, they looked at 2 possible builds, the partial build and the full build. Roughly the big difference is the amount of space gives you an extra 2 gates. The partial goes up to 10 gates and 11 parking spots. The full build gets you 12 gates. As we've gone through this development, you know, finances is always a big issue. The airport board, along with the planning team, looked at this and we said, well, we think we can make the partial build work and accommodate your future. But some of the things have been in flux as we've gone through that decision, and we were looking at that. We're rethinking it. Here's just the partial build to give you a perspective, is roughly 30 to 35 million. On the right is kind of the layouts where you'd have some additional concessions, additional hold rooms, expanded restrooms, things such as that. Right now, as I said, we're rethinking that and we're looking at the full build more and more. Some of the reasons we're looking at that is if you look at the aircraft right by the bottom where it says the letter C, that aircraft's right on where the output of the baggage handling system would be. So any tugs coming in and out of that area almost get sent out right towards an airport or an aircraft. We don't want to put anybody in harm's way or at risk of hitting an aircraft, damaging them, quite expensive, plus a lot of unhappy passengers. So we're looking to make sure that fully works. If that gate goes away or that jet bridge goes away, it drops it down to 11, so that's one of the points in consideration. The full build is about 45 to 50 million, so roughly you're looking at about a 15 million swing for the increased size of just that. In addition to that, you have additional concrete for the aprons, which brings that add-on to roughly 20 to 25 million dollars more money. Some of the things that we're seeing that are kind of pushing us in that range to go to a longer concourse is, you know, the Ellsworth Air Force Base expansion has been in the works for a long time. Every time we turn around, it seems like that number and the impact to the community is growing. So where we once started and what they're saying now always seems to be a little bit on the higher side. So as we look at that, this is kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts, where you got a little bit of increase there. We're hearing more about different entertainment venues coming into the area and what that'll mean. And as you get more entertainment venues, obviously more people from the outside want to come in. The more people that come in, the more you have expansion. So it kind of has a little bit of a snowball effect. In addition to that, with the impact of COVID, we've seen a lot of people in population growth studies showing, you know, Rapid City, one of the major growth areas in the country. That has become a more and more of an issue as we look at that and wanting to make sure we accommodate your future needs. In addition to that, the airport leadership team, along with their air service team, goes out and spends a lot of time contacting different airlines and talking to them. So they've been working with a multitude of airlines trying to grow and expand your air service. As we look at those and we look at realities, that growth in air carrier operations in and out of the airport, there's never a promise to who's coming in and out and when they're coming in and out, but it's looking more and more promising for everything going on at the Rapid City area and the region to see that growth in airlines. And as we look at that, that's one of the things that also drives your need for an expanded terminal. A secondary thing that's changed a lot in the last couple of years here is there's a huge pilot shortage for air carrier operations. What airlines are doing to accommodate that is they're upgauging in the aircraft. And so I just dropped some three-dimensional drawings or images there of the aircraft on the left would be a small regional jet, and they expand out to where like you would see in a Legion Airbus 319 or 320. And you have 737s, things like that. The numbers of those passengers, small regional jets run about 50 passengers to 76 passengers, depending on which type of regional jet. The larger upgauge in aircraft are going to likely go to 128 to 130 some, up to 150 or even 200 passengers. What that does to your hold room, if you can imagine you build your kitchen table to handle the family of 6, and obviously, oh, by the way, we're going to have guests over tonight and every night that are going to be 10 people or 12 people. Same thing when you go from 50 passenger to 150 passenger. that differential change is a huge item to have to overcome. A lot of these create, how do we handle and accommodate those? So we look at things not only from a macro picture of how many passengers you have going in, and just as the image on the left of the screen is your overall enplanements. Great news is Rapid City Regional is relatively back up from pre-pandemic levels. I think in 2021, you're just a couple thousand less than 2019, and that growth we continue to see growing. There are going to be a little ripples in this process as the pilot shortage comes through, but in the next several years, we would anticipate there may be some slowdown, but ultimately we expect to see some growth. The other side of it I wanted to highlight that a lot of people don't or may not know is Rapid City Regional is extremely seasonal. As you would imagine, you guys know in your community that the amount of tourism you have in the summer roughly doubles your passenger counts in about the 4 summer months from what you normally see. Most terminals are built not on the total number of how many passengers, they're built on the peak hour. And we often hear the likening it to a church. You don't say, well, how many people go to church, and you average it out through the day or the year or the week. You look at the peak hour. Very similar to terminals, you look at that peak hour. One of the things that we hear from governmental agencies, we don't want to build the airport for the peak day. We don't want to build the church for, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. That's one of the things we're very cognizant of in trying to manage the money side of it and the costs. However, your guys' 4 months is what Christmas Eve is or Christmas Day, so we have to look at that. When we look at your existing peak hours, is what you see on the screen there, the darker blue area, is your weekends in the summer. You're seeing peak hours right around 300 and a high peak of 394. Your weekdays in the summer are around 200 all the way up to 282. And then you see the other color where your winter months drop off significantly. Projecting the future and looking at some of these air carriers coming into the market, right now we would anticipate in 2030, from information provided by the air service consultants, conversations that the airport leadership team have been in conversation with a variety of things, it is not unrealistic to think that your peak hours could go up into the 700s on the weekends and even during the weekdays as that expands. For those reasons, we're thinking that we need to consider that longer terminal to handle just the bulk passengers. In addition to that, we look at the gates, which is the jet bridges and the areas for aircraft to park, and we look at destinations you have today and destinations projected in the future. In a perfect world, if the aircraft and the air carriers operated on a scripted area, came in when the airport wanted them to, we could get by with roughly 9 gates. However, airlines don't generally operate that way. They come in when it's convenient for them and works into their business model. So we think the right target is to have somewhere between 10 and 11. That also allows for, sometimes jet bridges break down, sometimes air carrier aircraft break down. It accommodates some of that flexibility. This also positions you for that growth. This right here is just an image from, I believe, 2021 during the rally, just to give you a feel for, you can kind of see in some of the aircraft size, you can see the small regional jets, you can see some of the bigger, what we would call mainline aircraft. You can also see aircraft bypassing each other and the tightness of when aircraft taxi. You got to have separation around the wings and things like that. As the upgauge and the aircraft go, we think we're going to lose some of the gates, or at least one of the gates on the north side, but we're further evaluating that in the design phase of this project. Some of the challenges as we look at a project of this magnitude, or the 4 sub-projects of it, is just the operational phasing. How do you keep the Rapid City Regional Airport operational during these times? Obviously, we'd want to minimize construction to off-peak season, things like that. We also have to look at how it fits with the air traffic control tower, making sure that it doesn't block any visibility. In some of our other presentations, we actually give you that view shed so you can see it. We also look at how the aircraft are parked, the terminal building, and how it fits into the airspace and relates to the runway operations. Big challenge, obviously, is the price tag on this is approximately $150 million at a planning level. Right now, the airport has just embarked on the design phase. We just had specialists in there looking at the electrical grid, all the utilities, all the different structural elements that go into it, and we'll be refining that. And in a future time, we'll come in and give a presentation that gives you actually design level estimates and design level details as we refine tune a lot of this information. Obviously, the biggest question for most of the community leaders is how much is this going to cost and how's it going to be funded? Interesting enough, primarily on big projects like this, the Federal Aviation Administration does fund quite a bit of it, but there's areas that are ineligible. There's also areas that just because of the magnitude of this much money, it's not reasonable to expect a complete funded project from the federal government. A routine project that you see on some of these are split at 90-10. So in something like this, you're looking at, if you were at a 90-10 split, would be quite a heavy lift for the federal government. Having been involved in many big projects like this, my argument I talk to most of my clients is the city and the airport need to work together along with the state entities and your congressional delegates to make sure everybody's pulling in the same way so that everybody owns a piece of this puzzle. Rapid City Regional reaches a huge part of South Dakota, parts of Wyoming and Nebraska and things like that, so your reach is pretty significant. It seems reasonable that we'd want to work with the state to see if they can come up and help contribute to this cause as well. Right now, the airports get funding for the FAA under a program called the Airport Improvement Program. That's the primary funding mechanism. There is a $20 million cap for terminals at airports the size of Rapid City for one of the funds called discretionary funding. The congressional delegates from many different states are aware of this issue and this concern. The FAA is in the process of doing a reauthorization. We're hopeful that that limit will be removed, but it is obviously a big concern. Other things that are going on in funding, we've all heard of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation or laws. There have added in roughly $500 million over the next 5 years for airports your size for terminal buildings specifically. It's a competitive process, but the airport has begun and we've submitted applications trying to compete this year for roughly about $6 to $7 million. The airport gets on a regular basis every year passenger entitlements at roughly $2.5 million. The bill funding also gave on a yearly basis for the next 5 years $2.78 million to the airport. It varies a little bit depending on passenger counts, but in that neighborhood. There has also been over the last several years something called supplemental funding that Congress has allocated to different fundings. There's a little bit left on that funding cycle, so there's variations there that may come into play. And then I'd mentioned the airport discretionary funds. It's limited for now. We're hoping that limitation gets removed. So we're working with the congressional delegates for South Dakota, the state governor, and DOT. We wanted to make sure that the city is briefed on this as well, so that's why we're here. Right now, we don't have a specific ask, just kind of giving you the details. They will become more and more clear as we move into the design phase. One of the things that the airport board, though, does have on their plate right now is the decision to go to the full build versus a partial build, and we are getting them some additional data to help make that decision. But that is one of the big decisions that need to be done in the short term. A lot of times people go, what's the timing on this? How long does it take? Right now, the design or the planning exercise has all been done over the last several years. We're in the design phase, and we just started that a few months ago. So we're doing the design and environmental clearance. The design was set for the partial build. So we're moving along in that vein, but we're telling all the designers for the different subsections to keep in mind that full build. What does it take to make that level? The rest of the years where you look at construction, we have it going out 6 years. Really, that varies on the availability of funding. So it's one of those things that if somebody landed a check for $150 million on our plate, we would obviously escalate that time frame and move that quicker. But we're more realistic than that. We tend to realize that you have to fight for every dime you get and plan for all the different entities and go through that. So this is probably a more realistic. We have the flexibility to move faster or to slow it down as well. And anywhere along the way, we can stop. If somebody says, well, we don't want to do anything, you can do that as well. We don't see that as advantageous, but it obviously is an option. Just to go over and recap before we open up to questions is near term, what we're looking at is a terminal expansion that has the concourse, the baggage makeup area, the ticket counters, arrival lobby, the baggage return, and aprons that go along with the apron or the terminal expansion. You're looking at roughly $150 million over the next 5 to 6 years. One of the things we have in here as well is in the planning phases, we've been evaluating the runway, the primary runway at the airport is getting to the end of its useful life. So in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to be looking at moving to the environmental phase of that so that that runway can be reconstructed. So the reason I put it in here is I know that decision makers, we don't want to surprise you on anything, that after this major project of the terminal, you do have another major project that has to be taken serious, because without that runway, you have no air carrier service at all. And that's getting into the end of its useful life, like I said. So we would anticipate in the next 10 years that has to be addressed. Having said that, threw a lot of different things at you, so I wanted to open it up for questions and see if there's anything me or Mr. Dame can answer.
Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Patrick, for this presentation. And I know there was a long delivery to the airport board, and one of the new board members and I will have a further contact after this. I think we're getting together next week, so I look forward to hearing what he has to say about this project. So I think it's all going to be good. I just remember that a few years back when we did the opening up of this terminal, forgive me, what year was that, this terminal built?
Madam Chair, Member Nordstrom, I believe we were in '89 for that one.
Thank you. Somewhere around '89, I was interested in that development and the construction of that airport at that time. And when I was getting tours of that, it was considered the state of the art at that point. And as time moves forward, it's no longer that way. And I'm glad to see that you folks are taking an interest in this to keep it updated, upgraded, everything else that goes along with it, because I see so many things that just kind of sit there, and we did a good job, and so I applaud you for coming forward with the efforts that need to be done and serious upgrades. One question I've got for you, Patrick, is are you on your current staffing at the airport, are you fully staffed right now?
Madam Chair, Member Nordstrom, we're very close to fully staffed now. We did just have a person resign today, but we've been doing a much better job recently in being able to get staffing levels up. But we have struggled throughout the past month and a half, but it's been coming around.
Thank you. The presentation yesterday had to do with the three-legged stools, the federal, state, and the local financing coming on that. And I know you haven't got all of that put together yet, but I want to add in that the NLC, the National League of Cities, may be able to help you out on the lobbying part as well. So if you can help me out, we're getting a one-pager, talking points to assist me so I can get that information to the National League of Cities. I'm on a committee, and that subcommittee that I'm on right now has to do with transportation infrastructure services, and I'm also involved with the intergovernmental side of it. So we get to do a lot of juggling of different agencies and entities. So if I get that information, I'd be glad to assist you on that side of that.
We would appreciate that. We do have a handout, one-pager that can follow along with this as well. And we did within recent weeks meet with Senator Thune, Senator Rounds, their staff, and also the governor's staff to make sure that everybody's briefed on this, because again, we want to make sure that the whole process, everybody's got to be brought along in the process, and that includes you guys as a city council. We're all working as a team from the state level all the way down to the lowest common denominator of our board and staff. So, we want to make sure that everybody's being brought along in this. We understand it's a major project, and there's some major needs there, but we think it's good for the good of the community.
There's other items I can discuss with you offline, but one of the things I may suggest, and maybe you've got it done already, is that one slide that shows the current partial and the full build-out. If you've got that available, I think that will help me out as well. So it shows the needs that need to take place. So I'm going to yield there for that, and then discuss more things with you offline. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm going to jump in here before Jason Solomon does. Will we see this presentation again on Monday?
No, we gave it to the other committee yesterday, and we're giving it to you guys today. We wanted to keep this at the committee level to keep it out of the full council meeting, just for more ease of working with it in the committee meetings.
Thank you. I was just going to say that, maybe I wouldn't ask my questions now if I was going to see this again on Monday, but I guess I will. Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Pretty interesting thinking about the pilot shortage and how that leads to bigger planes and that leads to how you plan. I think that's really interesting. Obviously, a hefty price tag. We'll call that an investment, right? I guess just a few comments. I know it's pretty early in this process, but when did this planning process begin?
We started this planning process a better part of 5 to 6 years ago, Member Solomon, on that. So in the conceptual state, we've got a lot of things that we had to address. And I can tell you that even the last, at least the last master plan for sure, tried to put some of these, we have some issues like the baggage movement issues that are kind of square pegs for round hole type issues. And we've really struggled over the last number of years with trying to get that right. We really tried to drill down in it in a primary study done, at least it was like 5 or 6 years ago that we did that one. When I first got here, we got that one going in an effort to put the conceptual piece behind this. So, but then this graduates into, we started moving into making some of that into fruition, and you saw the vertical circulation project that went forward into design out of that one. We were going to start the back of house design when we got to COVID, and we had to hit the brakes on that. So we backed that project out. Now we're trying to move things back in order to keep on moving. But we've been incrementally working through this process since I arrived.
So the rethinking of the terminals is based on data prior to the last couple of years? Is that what
I mean, we look back at data all the way through, and of course, obviously, data is still changing, as we're going through into a pretty good growth phase. And one of the things that I would say is that I think the board, as they looked at this, were really wanting to be conservative and respectful of the dollars associated with the project. So, they looked at the smaller build aspect of it, and, we really thought at one point that we could hopefully make that one work. As we're looking at some of the changes that have happened recently, just in our growth factor that we're going through, the pilot shortage issue, which that's going to ebb and flow. But primarily the small aircraft some of the 50-seat regional jets are going away and they're not coming back. Okay. So that's changing the nature of the industry as a whole. Well, the original terminal was set up as more of a bulb on the end that airplanes parked around that bulb. The outermost, or the closest gates to the actual main building itself were able to be there because of smaller airplanes and the ability to utilize where they could build out some of those smaller hold rooms and put jet bridges on them. Once they went in, they're primarily designed for smaller airplanes. As we're moving towards the bigger airplanes now, those hold rooms are going to get to be too small. They're ideal for 50 passengers and less, but you put 150 people in there, and you've seen gate 1 and gate 2 when you've walked through. If there's, if you've got a 50-seat regional jet, they're both pretty full, or a 76 at gate 2. So, we've had to look at that whole thing throughout this process the last several years.
Okay. Just off the top of my head, obviously this is a big topic. The question is not whether we're going to grow or not, it's whether we're going to get out in front of it or not. Mm-hmm. I think that whenever you're planning and you're going to spend this kind of dollars, don't plan in such a way that you're always playing catch up. You'd rather have room to grow into, and I think over the long run that's going to save you taxpayer funds. We've also talked about this, about thinking more regionally in a variety of ways. One thing you brought up before, and I'm curious if this is going to come forward, is the airport authority and getting more of a regional approach to our airport. Is that going to be in conjunction with this project and or the runway project in the future?
Madam Chair, Member Solomon, we are talking with a group that would look at studying the the potential process with that. Because when you start to look at a lift of a project like that, there has to be groups that are brought in terms of other communities, and you want to start big and then narrow it down to those who are willing to get in, and you also have to determine if it's the right move for all parties. So that is something that we are looking at and talking with a consultant by the name of Stephen Baldwin, not the actor, about doing that. And he's been someone who's worked with Grand Rapids, Michigan, worked with Cherry Creek, Michigan, a couple airports in Wisconsin, and they've had very successful projects that were deemed at a go, no-go decision to be, to move ahead or not move ahead, whichever made sense for all parties involved in anything. So we are starting to look at that process. We've talked about it for a number of years. And even when I first got hired here, that was a big topic of conversation. And 2 previous directors have looked at this, but no one's put a study into that level. So that is something we'll be talking with the board about in the upcoming probably 2 months.
Well, I understand this is preliminary, but I think obviously you're trying to scale for growth in the physical structure. And I think we also probably have to look at it in terms of how the airport's run to make sure that it can handle the new rules, so to speak, because we're getting bigger and seeing more growth. So we'll leave it at that for now. I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion in the future. I appreciate you taking the time and giving us a good overview. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, thank you. I got a little confused here. At the first part of your presentation, when you're talking about federal funds, you said something about 90% and 10% was on us, and then later on I heard 20% from the federal government. So can you clarify that for me?
Madam Chair, so not every project is the same with an eligibility standpoint. So when we're working with the FAA, eligible projects that we have that are completely eligible are funded at 90-10. Terminals are not something that are completely eligible, and oftentimes in projects, I've built a terminal from the ground up as well. You might end up in the 72% range that becomes eligible. You look at the space, and the reason why that is because revenue generating space, which airline ticket offices and things that we rent out, are not eligible for federal funding. If you think about what is eligible, think about things that you can see as a passenger. Those areas are eligible. We've done a lot of work in those areas at our airport. We haven't done a lot of work to the areas that the people work in. So when you look at it, when you tour our facility and we take you into the back room, it's like walking into the 1980s. And it's a lot different infrastructure behind the house than it is. We've got a very beautiful terminal for what people can see and what they transition through, but the working environments, or some of those areas, are not always eligible for federal funding. So as we work out with the FAA under...
Excuse me? The working environments are not?
Some of them are considered rental area, and Tom, you want to follow in more on that?
Yeah, any of the like where the baggage handling equipment is in the back.
Yeah.
Don't ask me how the law got this way, but the baggage equipment is eligible, but any of the space back there, so let's say if the back of the terminal was 50% of the space, 50% would not be eligible. It's not that big, but that is by law, and so...
Well, I don't like it.
The other thing, too, is one of the things when you're looking at projects of this magnitude, you get into what's eligible and what's not, and then the availability of federal funds.
Okay.
A project of this magnitude, if let's say you're at 150, you're not going to see 90% regardless, because the federal government will say, we have all these airports that have all these requests.
Okay.
We can't possibly pay for it all. So then you have that split, or the three-legged stool that was discussed, where you have local, state, and federal coming together.
All right, I'm going to yield now, and I think that's enough of a question at this point. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, I want to thank you for that quote that's on this slide that we're seeing right now by Henry Ford. I think it's, for those of us that are going through a tough day, this is very helpful. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. As I was putting together this presentation, I used to be the airport's district office manager for the Federal Aviation Administration, so I have about 24 years in the FA. When I look at these, I always marvel at the communities as we start this process, because I always feel like we don't have the wind at our back. We're fighting every step of the way. And so as I was going through it and looking at inspirational quotes, this one just came to mind. I thought, oh, perfect. Thanks.
Madam Chair, if I may add one more thing here. The one thing I would say too is the airport board is like I mentioned before, they're really wanting to make sure that they're doing the right decision, and that the smaller build piece versus the bigger build for them has been a very big decision. And as they move through that, I think any support that you guys can provide them on that, again, helps them out exactly in the, for the issues that they're working through right now, because this is a very big decision for the community.
It
So
is.
any support would be appreciated.
We do have Ron Weifenbach in the wings here, so Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So roughly looking at anywhere from $230 million to $260 million over into the next 10 years. Assuming that it's staged with the working environment, looks like it is priority. Would that be a correct assumption, or?
Priority, so in terms
To the
of.
airport, I know that the runway, maybe you can go over those timelines again and what relevance they play for the runway versus the improvements to the.
Madam Chair, Member Weifenbach, I think as we look at the priority system, as the FAA puts it, the runways become the highest priority. The easiest way to describe it is the further you move away from the runway, the lower the priority level goes. So when we're looking at it and we're looking at some of the terminal-related projects, we still have the runway in front of us in years, but we're trying to make sure that we're getting some things taken care of ahead of getting into that project as well.
So they could feasibly run into each other at some point if.
That is correct. They are going to be very close in proximity in projects.
So I don't think it was touched upon about if there was input from the Fed on the runway, the $90 to $100 million. There
Madam Chair.
cost share with the Fed.
Member Weifenbach, and I'll let Tom add on to this, but we have, along with briefing everybody along the way, we meet monthly with the Federal Aviation Administration in terms of this, so they're seeing all of this as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, there would be, I guess this is going to lead into my final question in funding for the percentage that needs to be driven past what the Fed is going to supply. What is, how do we achieve that? Like say the 20%. That's above and beyond what the Fed inputs. So if the project's $150 million and there's $30 million that's not being federally, or maybe it's 40 million or 50 million, where does that money come from?
So I think as we move through the process here and we get more design level numbers, part of it is going to need to be looking at the airport's available funds, the ability to bond on that, and then, whatever additional funds that the city would be willing to participate in with this. So, I mean, I do think that this is a multi-level stool. We will also, and we are also talking with the governor's office in terms of the state. So when we look at the local share on projects, the local share on eligible projects has typically been, if you look at the 90-10 aspect, the community or the airport pays 5%, and the state pays 5% of that total for the 100% aspect of it. So we have been splitting that aspect with the state as well. Now again, projects of this magnitude for the state are also a very heavy lift for their aviation trust fund. And we have been struggling with that aspect of it, but again, we're trying to give them enough lead time as well to ensure that, hopefully we can get an agreement with the state as well. So there's a lot of avenues that have to be worked as we get into the money, the cost aspect of this.
I appreciate that, and better sooner than later in planning ahead.
Yep.
And so we don't have a golf ball coming down the garden hose and we got no runway. So
Yep.
I appreciate your presentation today. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
All right, that leads us to the end of this presentation. Thank you. We have another presentation coming up. Parking Enforcement Division presentation by Parking Operations Manager Anna Gilligan.
Madam Chair, Anna is a part of the Community Development Department, and I just wanted to take a moment and introduce her.
Okay.
She is our division manager of this department. Councilman Nordstrom had reached out to us, boy, this microphone is loud, and asked if Anna would bring forward a presentation that just kind of in summary went through the duties of the division and the direction that we're going in the near future and then long-term future. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Anna. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Vicki. I'm Anna Gilligan. I'm the Parking Operations Manager. And I've just got a short presentation for you about the Parking Enforcement Division. The Parking Enforcement Division is made up of 3 parking enforcement officers who are out there on the street monitoring parking, and me, the Parking Operations Manager. I oversee the parking enforcement officers, the citation and appeal process, the budget, the maintenance of the hardware and software, and the maintenance of the parking lots and parking structure. We look to the Parking Advisory Board, a group of citizens and property owners downtown. They make policy recommendations and have the final say in appeals that go to the hearing stage. We monitor about 2,600 parking spaces downtown. About 1,200 of those are 2-hour parking spaces. About 630 of them are metered spaces. And we have about 100 spaces in the lower level of the parking structure that are monitored with 3 multi-space meters. There are 730 off-street leased parking spaces. So those would be in the upper 2 levels of the parking garage and in the city-owned lots around downtown. And we also monitor 13 loading zones across the downtown area. In the last half of 2017, Walker Consultants evaluated the parking system in downtown Rapid and put together a strategic plan for the city to use as a guide while revamping the system. As a result of the study, smart meters were installed in the downtown core. There are now no time limits on meters, and all of the old mechanical and coin-operated meters were removed. A 2-hour time limit was enacted in the peripheral downtown areas, and on-street permits were created as a way to encourage long-term parkers to park in these areas instead of the downtown core. We oversell limits for parking permits were increased in relation to occupancy levels, and revenue generated by the parking program now funds future costs of the parking program. All of the recommendations from the 2017 study have been met, and the revenue numbers prove the success of the parking program. In 2018, before implementation of the plan, parking revenue was $623,000. In 2019, the year the plan was implemented, revenue was about $1 million. In 2020, we were at $1.3 million, and in 2021, about $1.6 million. Looking to the future, in 2023, we are planning to expand our team to 4 parking enforcement officers. More officers will ensure more consistent enforcement, and consistent enforcement encourages compliance. And we are also looking to commission a new parking study to determine where we'll go from here. This will be an update to the 2017 study and will include a location for a new parking structure. Thank you.
Well, I would entertain some questions from the council here really quickly for you. Let's see here. Looks like Richie Nordstrom is up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anna, thank you very much for this presentation. So my first question, and I'm not sure if this goes to you or it's going to go to Ms. Fisher, Director Fisher, on the several questions came up about the Block 5 project that's going to be soon to be underway. And once it's completed, the question keeps coming up about the parking spaces, where that's going to go. Have you folks figured out an answer for that yet?
Madam Chair,
Please, Vicki.
Anna has diligently been working to find alternate parking. She's gone so far as to try to find out why people are using that surface parking. Do they live in the area? Do they work in the area? Where may an alternate parking space actually benefit them? We worked together and came up with a letter. She has reached out to several of them already via phone and other means of communication, but by the end of this week, they should all have received a written formal letter, and we're also doing email correspondence. Some people don't get their mail these days, or they see it's from the city and just throw it away. But we're putting everyone on notice that they need to use their new parking spot starting July 1. So I think it's been a collaborative effort, primarily from Anna herself. And once everyone receives the letters, we'll get more of a feel as to who's going to give us some pushback on it.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to hear that the 2017 study that you did, that you folks did, is completed, and now you're already looking for another future study to be done pretty soon. Where this kind of sticks with me is that we did this piecemeal before 2017, and so we finally got a study put together, and it came up with some good results. And it seems to be based on the revenue numbers that you're projecting as well. It looks like it's worthwhile, and it's working out. So it'll be interesting to see what we are going to be doing in the future for basically the growth of this community, and seeing what's going to be happening on that. Could you repeat the numbers again for me? How many lease spots we've got, and then the other parking meter and the other spots that could you repeat those numbers for me?
Yeah, there are 2,600 total parking spaces monitored downtown. 1,200 of those are the 2-hour spaces on the street. 628 of them, I believe, are parking metered spaces with just single space meters. Then we have 100 spaces in the lower level of the parking garage that are monitored by the pay stations, the 3 multi-space meters over there. And there are 730 off-street leased parking spaces. That is including the ones that will disappear with the Block 5 project.
The reason I'm asking these questions is because I keep getting comments, and I don't know if it's necessarily complaints on it, but they get the comments about there's no parking downtown. So, and sometimes I kind of wonder we've got a walking problem as well. So this might be able to help the community understand where the parking is available. Yes, they will not be able to park in the front door every time, but this to me shows that we have plenty of parking availability. And with the future study, I'm sure that'll tell us what we need to do in the next steps. So that's the reason why I wanted to rehear those numbers again. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I'll yield.
Thank you, Richie. I just got an amusing email. Let's see. Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of quick comments. My concern is not about today's parking, but about tomorrow's parking. So even though we're finding spots for people today and we think we have all these spots today, and I'm really telling all of us this, we really need to be looking at if we're going to grow, like we just talked about in the previous presentation, we should anticipate that growth will require parking downtown. And so I appreciate you looking into that. I know that's part of what you're doing. Secondly, I just want to make sure that As we measure the success of the program, revenue is the city of Rapid City as an entity, one of its measures of success, but I would also like to include that downtown businesses are also thriving as a result of this success, or if it's having a positive or negative impact. So I'm not saying this is having a negative impact. I'm just saying, as we talk about success, also being mindful of the success of those who do business and people who live downtown. So if we have that as part of the measure of success too, moving forward with whatever we have planned, that would make me happy. All right? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next up, would you like to say a word? Okay, we'll go to Vicki Fisher, Community Development Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we completely concur with that sentiment. And that is why there is a group of downtown business owners that do get together on a regular basis, and thankfully we get to be a part of those discussions as well. They see parking on a daily and consistent manner. You may get a complaint from a moment-in-time user that drives downtown and can't find a spot within 3 spaces of a front door they want to go to. But those that are down there, that are living in the community, that work in this area every day, are very pleased with the IPS meters. They've not seen the availability of parking that exists today since they opened their doors. And so when we look at that feedback, it's refreshing to know that the anticipated results have been confirmed. More importantly, though, we do know that our downtown area is changing, and it's changing quickly. Block 5 is only one of many projects that we are seeing and will see in the very near future. And so we made the determination this year that in next year's budget, we will be asking for the funding to do a parking study. We need to be looking ahead, anticipating what those needs are, and we need to be looking at School of Mine activity, what's happening there, how do we address that, and then also going to the west when we get to the YMCA. And there's a balancing act between them where those parking needs are. A lot of participation will be required, but we're really looking forward to seeing what that update to the 2017 study will show. Thank you, though, for pointing that out. It was a great comment and one that we're very cognitive of.
Chair recognizes Ron Weifenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been fortunate enough to go round and round on the downtown parking lot merry-go-round for several years. If anybody so wants to read it, I have a downtown study from 1994 that told us to do exactly what has been done, and it's been successful. So to that, we can applaud the people that had the political will at the time to do that. It just seemed there was a lot of kickback from it, but as it was established, went into effect, they've seen the success on it. I'm a downtown frequenter. I mean, I'm not going to say that people don't have a problem getting a spot. I've never had a problem. No one in my family's ever had a problem getting a spot. It's easy to use with the credit card, put it in, boom, and you don't even notice what it costs. A lot of times you've been checking. That's probably, therefore, relevant in the revenue. The question I had is on, there's a cost involved. Obviously, you got a revenue, and then you obviously got the expense side there. And for years, some of that was taken on, burdened by the general taxpayer. So is this parking revenue source, is it relative to the expense of removing snow, upkeep of the parking lots, removing snow in front of these businesses, those types of things? Generally, if you own a business, say it's Walmart or whatever, we'll use Walmart, it's simple to pick on them. They have a giant parking lot. They pay for all the upkeep of that parking lot. If you're a downtown business, you have frontage in front of your location, and the city plows that snow for you, removes the snow, piles it up, actually probably even a lot of times hauls it away. So is the revenue that generated, obviously is higher than it's been in a long time, is that used to pay those expenses directly?
Yes, all of the expenses used to maintain any of the lots or the parking structure come out of the parking fund.
Perfect. So, in the need of if there's a new parking study, that I would assume that expense would still be relevant to that. So we finally put the expense to and the revenue and expense together on that situation. I'm very happy about it. For me personally, I don't receive a lot of complaints about the downtown parking anymore, but I have in the past. I mean, to the point where it's utter chaos sometimes in my head to think that, you know, we know what the solution is, but you don't want the solution. Now they got the solution. Seems to be working. There's a lot of empty parking spots. You may have to walk a little ways, but it's available for you. So I'm excited about downtown. Been excited about it for a long time. It is a source that people use to judge our community. We've put a lot of effort and time into downtown, and parking is a big deal. So yeah, we're probably aware we're going to need another parking ramp. We've been thinking about that a long time. Instead of getting a ramp, we're getting a big giant building. But it's going to create more excitement downtown, probably create more revenue for the new parking ramp that we're going to anticipate at some point, I would imagine. So I appreciate the efforts, and if there's a way that someone could share that revenue and expense with the council people, I think they'd be thrilled to see that. So thank you, and nice meeting you.
Thanks.
Hello, Anna. I'm glad that you're here today because you reminded me that I haven't paid a parking ticket I got last week. So,
Just double.
yeah, so, forgot about that. Anyway, I was on several parking committees too. I was part of the Genius group that brought you free parking all in front of our most wanted spaces, and we saw how that worked. So, and we did have the political will to go back and fix that and make sure that the parking was actually being paid for in a relative way. And still, my friends from big cities laugh at giving us, you know, a quarter. Anyway, but however, it is working. You know, I hear from the businesses that they really like it because then there's parking places in front of where their customers want to be. And so I've gotten a lot of good feedback. And of course, there was the pushback at first, but now it's just working really well. And kudos to all that were involved in this and all that were on the council at that time, because it was not an easy decision to make. And we did get a lot of feedback from our constituents that was largely negative. But we've done the right thing and it shows. So thank you. Richie, do you still have something to say? Richie?
No, actually, I just want to give Director Fisher or Ms. Gilligan an opportunity to talk about the advisory council. We've got one opening right now. Is that true? And so I want to give you the opportunity to do a plug for the advisory council on the, yes, yeah, I'll let you correct the name on it.
Thank you. It's our Parking Board Advisory Committee. So we do have one opening, and the mayor's office has sent out a citizen interest PSA so that anyone that would be interested in sitting on the board, and you know, they do get to be a part of some important discussions and decision-making for our parking in our downtown area. We are really looking forward to getting someone from that area, maybe a little bit more on the outskirts of it, so that they really are a stakeholder as they're making decisions. So yeah, if you know of anybody that's interested, have them fill out an interest form, and the mayor will certainly take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. So, okay, and I have to, I'm going to apologize right now to Nick Stroud, because if we would have done what he had asked, he wouldn't be sitting here still. So let's go to number 3, approve the minutes for April 27th, 22. That's a consent item. And then we'll go on to Nick. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Now, Human Resources, number 4, authorize staff to negotiate with Gallagher Consulting to enter into an agreement for a non-union compensation study to be completed in 2022. Nick has asked that this be postponed. Nick, the podium's yours.
Oh, thank you. Now that it's the appropriate time to address this. I would like to ask that we move this to the next Legal and Finance Committee. We had hoped to have more information from our consultant, but they're very busy, they're traveling, so I'd rather bring it to you when it's fully prepared rather than half-baked, so that would be my request.
Need a motion? So moved. Moved by Lehman, second by excuse me, Nordstrom. And when are we moving this to exactly again?
It would be the next Legal and Finance Committee meeting, which I believe is June 1st.
Yeah, okay. Moving this to June 1st, that's the motion. Ron Weifenbach asked
Thank you,
to
Madam
speak.
Chair. I would only request that when you got that information, you get assimilated to us.
As soon as I get it, it'll be yours.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion. All in favor of postponing this item? Opposed? And it's postponed till June 1st.
Thank you very much.
Nick. Okay, the rest are consent items. Do we have any that oh, excuse me, I've got to go to Kyle first. No, that's, excuse me, non-consent. Okay. So we're just going to see, does anybody here want to pull an item? Anybody on the council? Okay. Are there any directors that would like to acknowledge anything or make us more aware of anything on the consent items? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar. That was awkward. Moved by Nordstrom, second by Lehman, kinda. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? And the consent calendar is approved. We go on to community development items right now. We have item 17 for public comment public comment is open for items 17 and 18. I do have a request from Kyle Trelor here. So Kyle, if you'd like to approach the podium. Okay, I only have 2 meetings left.
Thank you. Kyle Trelor with Dream Design, talking about the Black Hills Industrial Park TIF that you'll hear momentarily. Sarah's got a great presentation put together. She'll cover it very well. Just wanted to kind of give a brief update that, this project is really moving forward. We've seen incredible interest, the rail access, the large industrial sites. They have incredible value, and this one particular project is drawing in interest from all over the country right now. So it's an incredible project. We're very, very excited to be a part of it. We're excited for it to continue to move forward and to jump into construction here this summer. I do have just a real quick video presentation that's going to be an overview of kind of how this looks. I know sometimes you see a lot of plan view. This is going to be more of an aerial, 3-dimensional video, and I'll play that. And of course, if there's any questions afterwards, I'll be available for those.
Kyle, excuse me, how long is the presentation?
It's a minute and a half.
Okay. Does everyone here agree that we can see this presentation? Okay, go ahead, Kyle.
Located along the Heartland Express, just south of Katrin Boulevard, and a short drive from Rapid City Regional Airport, is the Black Hills Industrial Center. The center will be home to many technology and value-added agricultural industries to address our regional and national needs. This location has a strategic advantage in reliable power sources and uninterrupted access to the railroad. Industries will create an innovative environment to capture the talented graduates from the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. Value-added agriculture will be a focus of the development, opening new markets to South Dakota's largest industry. Industry leaders in technology and manufacturing have shown interest in the project and are making commitments to make this site a home for their business. This includes Acer Technology. They are constructing a $120 million facility to produce state-of-the-art batteries, meeting the demands of the rapidly growing renewable energy and technology industry. The center will provide more than 2,000 professional jobs that will improve the regional wage scale and enhance the quality of life within the Black Hills. The center will complement the mission at Ellsworth Air Force Base and provide reliable employment for families of enlisted men and women. Dream Design is proud to partner with local and state governments to bring the largest industrial development in Rapid City's history. It will transform our regional economy and help protect our natural resources and the environment of the Black Hills.
Thank you, and I'll be available for any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item 17, Community Development. Approve resolution number 2022-34, a resolution creating a tax increment district, and approve resolution number 2022-35, a resolution to adopt project plan for the Black Hills Industrial Center, request by Dream Design International, Inc. for Black Hills Industrial Center, LLC, for property generally described as being located at South Dakota Highway 79 and Old Folsom Road. Motion. Oh, do we have another? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I do have a condensed version of the presentation that was given to the Planning Commission. If you'd like to see it, it's about 7 or 8 slides to introduce the project and some of the elements.
Everybody's in? Okay. All right. Because this is a long meeting, so I just have to check with my comrades. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. So item 17 is the proposed Black Hills Industrial Center Tax Increment District. What you're making a decision on at the council meeting is 2 different resolutions. One resolution to create the boundary for the tax increment district, and the second to adopt the project plan. And the key element of the project plan being what costs are included in the project plan and what level of costs are being funded by tax increment financing. So here you can see a boundary of the proposed district. It's over 900 acres, of which about 600 acres are rail-served, high-tech, and value-added agricultural products for the proposed development that you just saw in the video. As Kyle noted, the Phase 1 anchor business is the Acer battery plant. But there are also other manufacturing entities that are anticipated, including food processing and medical equipment and plastics manufacturing. The application has identified at least 2,000 new jobs that are anticipated to be created. The vast majority of those are expected to bring in an annual income of about $45,000 a year. And this development is proposed in 3 phases with $78 million in proposed costs. I do want to point out that the TIF committee reviewed this project on March 1st of this year, and at that time the application was for about $46 million in project costs. After that meeting, the applicant received some additional comments from staff with recommendations about some additional infrastructure pricing and maybe some revised cost estimates totaling around $5 million. So they made some changes to their application and also made changes to account for inflation that we're seeing in the market. So as a result of that change, the revised application that was submitted and reviewed by the Planning Commission on April 21st is a $78 million project. Both versions include about $500 million in development and include about 2,000 full-time jobs. The financing really constituted a major component of the vast 70% increase between the 2 projects. Here's a master plan of the types of projects that are included in the proposal. It includes quite a lot of site grading, drainage, improvements to roadways, including Old Folsom Road, Creek Drive, and Acer Boulevard. They're including turn lanes, rail switches and rail lines, off-site water and sanitary sewer, traffic signals, utility relocations, and lastly, a booster station, in addition to financing and the administrative costs of the TIF. And so that's how you get to the $78 million total. For this request, the applicant is requesting $36.7 million in infrastructure specifically, and they've identified about $4.5 million for non-TIF infrastructure. So in other words, the TIF is paying for all but about 12% of the entire infrastructure costs. And I do want to point out, this is in the project plan and in the presentation given to the Planning Commission, that of the $78 million request, about $11 million could potentially be considered a city cost at some point in the future if the district were not to be created. I want to highlight a couple of relevant tax increment financing policies from our local level, from our local TIF policy, and that has to do with costs that can be included at the discretion of the governing body, which are found to be necessary or convenient to the creation of the district. And for this project, I want to just point out that the rail lines and the rail switches are privately owned infrastructure to be owned by the developer and used exclusively for this development and the many entities in this area. Typically with many of our tax increment financing projects, we see oversizing as an eligible expense. This proposal really isn't positioned around oversizing. It appears to include all of the typical developer costs for streets, utilities, and grading. And there are not typical costs and exceptional costs and oversized costs separated out, so staff was not able to analyze the costs at that level. And then another element of our TIF policy is that there are certain costs which are only allowed upon authorization of the City Council. So for this project, street grading and overlot grading for specific development sites, the Planning Commission kind of took a pause at this and wanted just to ensure that as this came forward to the City Council, it was quite clear that per our policy, only the City Council has the authorization to really include these costs and make a recommendation on that. So that's something to be aware of with the Planning Commission recommendation. Some of the projections for the project, what are we looking at with the value of the land today and what's expected at full build out? The base valuation will be determined by the State Department of Revenue, but we're anticipating that it'll be just over $1 million for those 900 acres. Using the 2021 tax levies and the proposed project costs, we're looking at up to, and probably including the entire 20 years, depending on how fast things build out and what the valuations look like. And the anticipated end valuation is $500 million with, like I said, a 20-year payoff. One component in the project plan to pay particular close attention to is the impact on the taxing entities. That is the analysis that we perform that looks at how are these project costs of $78 million, how is that impacting the taxing agencies along the throughout the life of the TID. And in looking at that, the decision makers are acknowledging that the but-for aspect of any TIF, that if the project is not going to go forward but for the TIF, then those costs and the deviation of that tax revenue during the life of the TIF is justified. So just something to keep in mind as well with regard to the impact of the taxing agencies. I will be available for any other questions you have. Obviously, this is a large project and a lot of detail, but in respect for your time today, I'll just close by saying that the Planning Commission recommended that staff bring forward the resolution for the project plan and the boundary, and that they did approve the stipulations that we recommended be included to move forward with the developer's agreement, should it come forward to that. So I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Jason Solomon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I direct a question to Ms. Hansel?
Please.
And/or Ms. Fisher, whoever is appropriate. I mean, this is exciting, and obviously a base valuation of just over $1 million with an ending one projected at $500 million. That's significant. So we're pretty excited about this project, but it is curious, the stipulations added sure did bump up the price tag of what was, anticipated to be in the TIF. So would you give a brief overview of what those recommendations were for us?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I might just clarify, the stipulations in the project report had to do with how the developer's agreement would handle certain items of maintenance, particularly with regard to the privately owned rail lines and how they intersect with public streets. So the stipulations that I'm talking about are more in that vein. But when I started the presentation and I talked about comments received from staff with increased pricing, that was staff looking at some of the pricing estimates that they had and that they may be too low. And so they identified about $5 million for different components for piping, et cetera, that should potentially be increased. And then the applicant at the same time increased some of their estimates as well. So that's where only about $5 million came from the staff comments. Let me put this slide up. This is from my presentation to the Planning Commission. The changes were about $5 million from city staff comments, and then the rest of the changes were the developer changes to the project.
Including it looks like the significant part being in that professional fees and financing.
That's correct.
Contingencies. Was that not there before?
Those elements were all in there before. They were just estimated at a lower level.
Okay. So can you go to that next slide for me real quick?
This one?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the project cost. I mean, that's a pretty big bump, 46 million to 78. So
it is.
Is that unusual? I'm just thinking, or is that just the scale of the project just requires that kind of significant
It's
change?
about a 70% increase. That's a substantial increase. A lot of that comes from amortizing out the financing, pardon me, over the whole of the, over 20 years. You're paying interest on those extra costs. That does add up.
Madam Chair?
ahead.
So the black and white answer is yes. To see this significant jump is unusual. I mean, the $78 million TIF is in itself a large amount. We did, at the time when this change came in, from the time that the TIF committee approved the item and sent it forward, we did contemplate sending it back to the committee. But once we got the analysis of what the difference was in why it was increased, it was determined that we would bring it forward to the Planning Commission, make them fully aware of the elements within the increase, and let them decide if they wanted to take action or send it back to committee.
And I would just say, I appreciate being realistic up front on this project rather than us get down the road and have to make any adjustments, because, I mean, that is the appropriate way, that if it's going to cost more, that we take care of that right up front and anticipate, what may or may not happen. So thank you for the explanation to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Nordstrom, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sarah, I applaud you for putting all of this together and all the hard work that you've been involved in this since basically day one. Are you getting some assistance on this to do mostly the admin work? I'm referencing to Black Hills Council of Local Governments. Will they be assisting you on this?
Specifically, Black Hills Council of Local Governments, no, but I will say that there is an extraordinary team effort among all members of staff across the Finance Department and Public Works. A lot of staff are involved in reviewing these.
There is a lot of work that gets put into this, so I appreciate the brevity of the presentation. I mean, it's our responsibility to do some of the vetting of this. So I've seen this a few times, so getting to take a look at all that information. I appreciate what you folks have to do to put this all together. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Fisher?
If I might, so thank you, Sarah, for acknowledging the other departments. Both Pauline and Dale's teams, and Pauline in particular, they join us at numerous ventures during the review of these items to ensure that we're considering all aspects of city interest and considerations. Sarah does do the bulk of the heavy lifting. The good news is that we have recently posted a position that will be a TIF administrator for the city that will be under Sarah's review to be assisting Sarah in these projects, because it is a heavy lift for one employee.
Okay, Chair recognizes Ron Wevenbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I have, Sarah, would be, how much is the interest cost over 20 years?
The interest costs, thank you. I'm going to break it out by phases, if that's okay. We've got phase 1 is 7.4 million. You can see that on the second line up from the bottom.
Okay.
Phase 2 is 11 million.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 3 is 16 million.
Okay.
For a total of, I think it's 36 million?
The reason I
Excuse
point
me,
that out is because
34.7.
as we look at these numbers, and then you put that number into it, and it elevates the number. And I'm sure that the developer would love to have the city just put the $40 million up front and have us finance it and earn the $30 million, so they're not on the hook for the $70 million. It's something that my colleagues should consider in the future. Obviously, we're getting $11 million from what I understand in what costs may come in the future. It's one of the situations I think that our Public Works would see, that in development, some of the hurdles we get against is what it costs to develop in our community. But not only that, it's like when you put one development and then you plan for that development, and then you got to oversize for another development, trying to see into the future how that may fit. What is this going to do to the roads in the area? Obviously, they're addressing it within this $11 million of money that the taxpayers of Rapid City aren't going to pay out, but they're going to get the results of 2,000 jobs or whatever it may create. Maybe if it's even 1,000 jobs, and the tax revenues that'll create going from $1 million to 500 million. I can guarantee you in 20 years it'll be well over 500 million because of the factors that are involved in our area right now, as people have seen on their house values, types of things like that. But it's something that is relative. There's $30 million worth of interest on this number. I know it looks big. When you add that $30 million on that number, that makes it look bigger. But that's also $30 million of extra risk that the people that are taking on this project, they have. If this project doesn't work, they're paying. So it's important to know that, and it's important going forward. As the council goes forward and we look at opportunities to get some of the things and some of these developments that the city needs, is investing our own money, being our own bank, and taking that $30 million and parlaying it into what could be future oversizing costs, future water towers, future road expansions, those things that we're not getting because the cost to develop just this one project is way too much for the city to handle. I mean, even on a smaller scale, if we couldn't do 40 million up front, maybe we could do $5 or $10 million in another neighborhood, collect that interest ourselves on our own tax district, because the minutia part of the property tax that the city gets and overall what this is going to get is a huge investment. So just even at 6% interest is a pretty good investment in today's world. You know, as interest rates climb, and I'm not sure what'll transpire with that, but I wanted to make that point with this project going forward that, yeah, it is big and it's huge, but they're on the hook for it. The city's not on the hook for it. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Lance Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to make a motion to approve the item.
A motion by Lehman to approve, second by Solomon. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And this motion is approved. We go on now to City Attorney's Office. Introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6539, an ordinance amending section 15.04.030 of the Rapid City Municipal Code regarding the authority of the building official. Approved by Ron Weifenbach, second by Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. Aye. We have one addition to today's agenda. Community Development, number 19, authorize mayor and finance director to sign the fiscal year 21 mid-year common bonds contract and covenants. Have a motion? Okay, motion to approve by Weifenbach, second by Lehman. Chair recognizes Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I direct a question? I'm going to assume for community development, since it's under that header?
Please.
Or it could be the city attorney, but
It could be.
it's just a clarification just for the council that we've already approved this in CDBG funding and that this is just the legal agreement in order to apply that funding. Is that correct? Is there? Vicki is shaking her head yes.
Okay.
Director Fisher, excuse me.
As is Michelle Schulke in the audience.
Schulke is over there. So everybody's shaking their head yes. So I'm just clarifying, since it was a late addition, that that's what this is. And if city attorney, you also agree with that that's a decent summary for the council? Okay, I yield.
The motion is to authorize the signing of this agreement. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? No. On my part, one no. So the motion passes. And then motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair.
Motion by Solomon, second by Lehman. All in favor?
Madam Chair.
Oh, excuse me.
Can I just say one thing before we adjourn?
Yes.
I failed to comment on one of the items, number 11, the $895,000 grinder at the solid waste. It's an important factor in that landfill going forward that the city has that in place. I don't know how long it's going to take to get it, but it will help expand the life expectancy of the landfill. What they do is they'll grind their garbage with this machine. We have one machine now, Madam Chair, and they're going to add this another machine. It was part of a plan that they talked about, the rate study. It wasn't just a rate study. It was part of implementing finding efficiencies. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
I would like you to bring that up also on Monday, if you could remove this item on Monday's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, I will.
Okay, and we are adjourned.